My name is Scarlett, and I am 23 years old. What started as my mother screaming those words at me during our worst fight ever ended with me uncovering the most devastating family secret that shattered everything I believed about love, loyalty, and blood relations. The discovery I made 3 months later did not just change my life, it destroyed my entire family dynamic and revealed a betrayal so deep that even now, sitting here with the evidence spread across my kitchen table, I still cannot believe the people who raised me were capable of such calculated cruelty. Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, and while you are here, hit that like button if you are ready for some serious family drama that will leave you questioning everything. Do not forget to subscribe, because trust me, you will want to stick around to see how this betrayal unfolds and how justice finally gets served. The fight that changed everything happened on a rainy Tuesday evening in March. I had just graduated summa cum laude from Stanford with a degree in computer science, and instead of celebrating, I was back home in Sacramento, arguing with my parents about my future. My mother Patricia stood in our granite-covered kitchen with her arms crossed, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the light from our expensive chandelier. My father Robert sat at the breakfast bar in his tailored suit, scrolling through his phone like the conversation bored him. "You think you are so superior with that fancy degree," my mother spat, her voice dripping with resentment. "Walking around here like you are better than us, turning your nose up at the family business. Well, if you are so smart, then pay your own bills." The family business she referred to was their successful chain of luxury car dealerships across Northern California. For years, they had expected me to join them after college, but I had different dreams. I wanted to work in tech, maybe start my own company someday. The tension had been building for months. "I never said I was better than anyone," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just want to pursue my own career path." "That does not make me ungrateful." "Ungrateful is exactly what you are." My father finally looked up from his phone. "Do you have any idea how much money we spent on your education? The private schools, the tutoring, Stanford, and this is how you repay us." What happened next still makes my blood boil. My mother walked over to her purse, pulled out a thick manila envelope and threw it at my feet. Business cards, receipts, and papers scattered across the marble floor. "Since you want to be independent so badly, figure out how to pay back every penny we spent on raising you. Consider it a loan with interest." I stared at the papers in shock. They had actually calculated the cost of my entire upbringing, down to estimated food costs, clothing allowances, and even birthday presents. The total came to over $400,000. "You cannot be serious," I whispered, but their faces told me they were deadly serious. "Dead serious," my mother confirmed. "You have 6 months to start making payments or we will take legal action." We kept receipts for everything. That night, I packed a single suitcase and left for my friend Madison's apartment in San Francisco. I felt hurt, angry, and completely blindsided. How could the people who claimed to love me unconditionally treat me like a business transaction? For the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into job applications and interviews. My Stanford degree opened doors quickly, and I landed a position as a software engineer at a promising startup. The salary was good enough to rent a small studio apartment and start building my independent life. But something nagged at me about that envelope full of papers. The numbers seemed too precise, too organized. My parents were successful business owners, but they had never been the type to obsessively track personal expenses. Curiosity got the better of me. I started digging through my old room during a visit when they were out of town. In my father's home office, I discovered a filing cabinet I had never paid attention to before. The lock was flimsy, and my computer science background had taught me a few things about getting around security measures. What I found inside those files made my stomach drop to the floor. Adoption papers. My adoption papers. I had been adopted when I was 6 months old. My entire life had been a lie. The 2 people who claimed I owed them for raising me had chosen to take me in, received tax benefits for adoption, and in some cases had actually been paid by the state for my care during the early years. But that was not even the worst part. Digging deeper through the files, I found correspondence between my parents and my biological mother. She had been trying to contact me for years, letters, emails, cards on my birthday, all intercepted and hidden from me. She had never abandoned me like they claimed. She had been a teenager who made the difficult decision to place me for adoption because she wanted me to have a better life, and she had hoped for some form of contact as I grew up. The most recent letter was dated just 3 months ago. My biological mother, whose name was Elena Rodriguez, had been diagnosed with breast cancer. She was asking my adoptive parents to please let her see me one time before her treatment began, just to know I was happy and healthy. My parents had never even told me she had tried to contact me. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands shaking with rage and disbelief. 23 years of lies. 23 years of making me feel guilty for existing, for costing them money, for not being grateful enough. And all along they had hidden my real history from me while profiting from my presence in their home. The betrayal cut deeper than any argument we had ever had. They had not just lied about my origins, they had actively prevented me from knowing my biological mother, especially during what might be her final months. As I sat in that office surrounded by evidence of their deception, something cold and calculating settled in my chest. They wanted to treat our relationship like a business transaction. Fine. I would show them exactly how business worked when you crossed the wrong person. The drive back to my apartment felt like moving through fog. My mind raced with questions that had no good answers. How do you process 23 years of lies? How do you reconcile the people who raised you with the people who could hide something so fundamental about your identity? I spent the entire weekend researching adoption laws in California, reading about adoptee rights and learning about biological parent contact regulations. The more I discovered, the angrier I became. In California, adoption records are typically sealed, but biological parents can file contact preference forms, indicating their desire for contact when the child reaches 18. Elena had filed multiple requests over the years. My parents had legal right to control contact while I was a minor, but once I turned 18, they had no authority to intercept communications meant for me. What they had done for the past 5 years was not just morally wrong, it was potentially illegal. But I needed more information before I could decide how to proceed. I needed to find Elena. Using the return addresses from her letters, I located her current address in Los Angeles. My hands trembled as I dialed the phone number I found through online directories. Hello? The voice was soft, slightly hoarse. Is this Elena Rodriguez? Yes. Who is this? I took a deep breath. This is Scarlett. I think you might be my biological mother. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought she had hung up. Then I heard quiet sobbing. Scarlett, oh my God, is it really you? I have been trying to reach you for so long. How did you find me? It is a very long story. Can we meet? She lived in a modest apartment in East Los Angeles, a far cry from the luxury I had grown up with in Sacramento. When she opened the door, I saw my own eyes looking back at me. The same dark brown color that had always seemed out of place in my blonde, blue-eyed, adoptive family. Elena was 41 years old, a nurse who worked night shifts at a county hospital. She was small and tired-looking, with a colorful scarf wrapped around her head. The cancer treatment had taken her hair, but her smile when she saw me was radiant. You are so beautiful, she whispered, reaching out hesitantly to touch my face. You look just like your grandmother did at your age. We spent 6 hours talking. She told me about her teenage pregnancy, her difficult decision to place me for adoption, and her hope that someday we might have a relationship. She showed me photos of my extended family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins I never knew existed. People who had wondered about me for years but respected her decision to place me with a family who could provide better opportunities. I never wanted to disrupt your life, she explained. I just wanted to know you were happy. When I got sick, I thought maybe it was time to try one more time to make contact. They never told me, I said quietly. I found your letters by accident. They have been hiding them for years." Her face darkened with understanding and anger. "That was not the agreement we made. They promised they would tell you about me when you were old enough to understand, and that they would facilitate contact if you wanted it. There was an agreement." Elena disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a folder containing copies of all the adoption paperwork. The contact agreement was clearly spelled out. My adoptive parents had committed to honesty about my origins and to facilitating contact with Elena if she requested it, and if I was willing once I reached 18. They had violated every part of that agreement. But Elena had something else that made my blood run cold. Financial documents showing that my adoptive parents had received not just tax benefits for my adoption but also monthly support payments from the state for my care until I turned 18. They had been paid to raise me, and yet they were trying to make me pay them back for the privilege. "I kept copies of everything," Elena explained. "I wanted to make sure that if anything went wrong, there would be a record of what was agreed upon." As I drove back to San Francisco that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We need to discuss your payment plan for what you owe us. This ridiculous tantrum has gone on long enough." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "We definitely need to discuss payments. I will call you tomorrow." But I was not planning to discuss paying them anything. I was planning something much more comprehensive. That night, I created a detailed timeline of every lie, every hidden letter, every violation of the adoption agreement. I researched California laws about fraud, breach of contract, and emotional distress. I documented the state payments they had received for my care, while simultaneously calculating what they claimed I owed them. Most importantly, I started planning exactly how to expose their hypocrisy and greed to everyone who mattered in their lives. They wanted to play hardball with family relationships. They were about to discover that their adopted daughter had inherited something they never expected, a talent for strategic thinking and a complete lack of tolerance for being manipulated. My parents had spent years building their reputation in Sacramento's business community. They were active in charity work, church committees, and professional organizations. They had cultivated an image as successful family-oriented people who valued honesty and hard work. I was about to show everyone exactly who they really were behind that carefully constructed facade. The game was changing, and this time I was playing to win. Over the next 3 weeks, I built my case like I was preparing for the most important software launch of my career. Every detail mattered, every piece of evidence needed to be airtight, and every move had to be calculated for maximum impact. Elena became my closest ally in this process. Despite her cancer treatment making her weak and tired, she was determined to help me gather evidence of my parents' deception. She had kept meticulous records over the years, including screenshots of emails my parents had sent, refusing her contact requests, and copies of certified mail receipts proving they had received her letters. "I trusted them to do the right thing," she told me during one of our regular phone calls. "I was so young when I placed you for adoption, and they seemed like such good people. They promised they would always be honest with you about your story." But Elena was not my only ally. Madison, my friend who had let me stay with her after the initial blow-up, turned out to be a goldmine of connections. Her older sister Jessica worked as a family law attorney in Sacramento, and when I explained the situation, Jessica was immediately interested. "What your parents did violates multiple parts of California adoption law," Jessica explained during our meeting in her downtown office. "The contact agreement is legally binding, and intercepting mail meant for you after you turned 18 could constitute mail fraud. But more importantly, if they received state payments for your care and are now trying to charge you for that same care, that is fraud." Jessica agreed to represent me pro bono after I showed her the evidence. She said the case was so clear-cut that she expected we could not only stop their demands for repayment, but potentially recover damages for emotional distress and breach of contract. But I wanted more than just legal victory. I wanted social consequences. I started with research into my parents' professional and social circles. Robert served on the board of directors for the Sacramento Chamber of Commerce and was a deacon at their church. Patricia was involved with 3 different charity organizations, including one that specifically helped teen mothers find resources and support. The irony was not lost on me that my mother spent her volunteer time helping young women in situations similar to what Elena had faced while simultaneously hiding Elena's attempts to contact me. I created a detailed presentation that told my story chronologically, with supporting documents for every claim. I included photos of Elena's letters, copies of the adoption agreement, documentation of the state payments my parents had received, and screenshots of their demand for repayment. The presentation was professional, factual, and devastating. Madison helped me set up anonymous email accounts and research the contact information for everyone in my parents' professional and social circles. We identified board members, charity committee members, church leaders, business associates, and family friends. "Are you sure you want to go this nuclear?" Madison asked as we worked late into the night preparing the email distribution list. "Once you send this, there is no taking it back." I thought about Elena, sitting alone in her small apartment, wondering for years if I hated her or simply did not want contact. I thought about all the birthdays and holidays when she had hoped for just a card or a phone call, not knowing that my parents were actively preventing any communication. "They made this choice when they decided to lie to me for 23 years, I replied. "They want to treat family relationships like business transactions. Fine. Let them face the business consequences of fraud and breach of contract." But before I pulled the trigger on the mass email, I had one more conversation to have. I called my parents and arranged to meet them for lunch at their favorite restaurant in Sacramento. They seemed pleased that I was apparently ready to discuss their repayment terms, and they agreed immediately. The restaurant was upscale but not too busy for a Tuesday afternoon, perfect for a private conversation that might get heated. I arrived early and chose a corner table where we could speak without being overheard. When they walked in, they looked exactly like the successful, confident business owners they had always been. Patricia wore a designer dress and expensive jewelry. Robert carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to being in charge. "Scarlett, sweetheart," my mother said, leaning down to air kiss my cheek. "I am so glad you came to your senses. We really need to work out these payment arrangements." "We have been more than patient with this temper tantrum," my father added, settling into his chair. "But it is time to be realistic about your obligations." I opened the folder I had brought and placed a copy of my presentation in front of each of them. "You are absolutely right," I said calmly. "It is time to be realistic about obligations. Starting with yours." Patricia opened the folder first, and I watched her face go white as she saw Elena's letters and the adoption agreement. Robert looked over her shoulder, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "Where did you get these?" Patricia whispered. "From the woman whose attempts to contact me you have been hiding for 5 years," I replied. "The woman who placed me for adoption with the understanding that you would be honest about my origins and facilitate contact when appropriate." Robert cleared his throat, his businessman mask sliding back into place. "This is ancient history, Scarlett. We made decisions we thought were best for you at the time, best for me, or best for maintaining your perfect family image. You do not understand how complicated the situation was," Patricia said, her voice defensive. "Elena was unstable back then. We were protecting you." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a photo of Elena and me from our recent meeting. She looked tired from her cancer treatment, but was smiling warmly with her arm around me. "This is the unstable woman you were protecting me from. A nurse who has been fighting cancer while trying for years to know if her daughter is happy and healthy." The silence at the table was deafening. "Here is what is going to happen," I continued, my voice steady and professional. "You are going to immediately stop demanding repayment for money the state already paid you to raise me. You are going to write a formal apology to Elena for violating the contact agreement. And you are going to publicly acknowledge your mistakes." "Or what?" Robert challenged, his face reddening with anger. I smiled coldly. "Or tomorrow morning every member of your church, every business associate, every board you serve on, and every charity you volunteer with will receive a detailed presentation about your fraud, your lies, and your violation of adoption agreements." complete with documentation. You would not dare, Patricia gasped. Try me. You taught me that family relationships are just business transactions. Well, consider this a hostile takeover. The power dynamic at that table had completely shifted, and we all knew it. They were no longer the successful parents dealing with an ungrateful child. They were exposed frauds facing someone who had evidence of their wrongdoing and the skills to use it effectively. The tension in that restaurant was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But this confrontation was just the beginning of their downfall. What happened next would shake their entire world to its core, and honestly, I was just getting started. Are you ready to see how this family drama reaches its explosive climax? Because what I had planned next would expose them in ways they never saw coming. I stood up from the table, leaving the presentation folders behind. You have 24 hours to decide whether you want to handle this privately or publicly. Choose wisely. As I walked away, I heard Patricia crying softly and Robert muttering angry words under his breath. But I felt nothing except cold determination. They had spent years making me feel guilty for existing, for costing them money, for not being grateful enough. Now they were about to learn what real consequences looked like. The war was officially declared, and I had just fired the first shot. I gave them 24 hours, but honestly, I knew they would not take the honorable path. People who lie for 23 years do not suddenly develop integrity when confronted with evidence. So, when my phone remained silent the next evening, I was not surprised. At exactly 9 a.m. the following morning, I hit send on what would become known in their social circles as the email that destroyed the Anderson family reputation. The subject line was simple and professional. Important information regarding Robert and Patricia Anderson, documentation included. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Email delivery confirmations, read receipts, and then the replies started pouring in. Board members expressing shock and disappointment. Church leaders requesting immediate meetings. Charity organization directors asking for clarification about Patricia's volunteer status. But the real fireworks started around noon when Robert called me, screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. You vindictive little bitch, do you have any idea what you have done? I have had 12 board members call me this morning demanding my resignation. Patricia is being asked to step down from every committee she serves on. Our business reputation is ruined. Funny how quickly people lose respect for you when they discover you are a fraud, I replied calmly. Maybe you should have thought about that before lying to me for my entire life. We raised you, we gave you everything. This is how you repay us. You were paid by the state to raise me, and now you want me to pay you again. That is called double dipping, Robert. Most people consider it theft. The line went quiet for a moment, then Patricia grabbed the phone. She was crying, her voice broken and desperate. Scarlett, please, we made mistakes, but we love you. You are our daughter. How can you destroy your own family like this? For just a moment, I felt a flicker of the old guilt they had always used to manipulate me. Then I thought about Elena sitting in chemotherapy treatments while wondering if her daughter even knew she existed. I am not destroying anything, I said firmly. I am simply telling the truth. If the truth destroys your reputation, maybe the problem is not the truth. What happened over the next few days exceeded even my expectations. The story spread through Sacramento's business and social communities like wildfire. Local news stations picked up the story after someone leaked my presentation to a reporter. The headline read, "Prominent local business owners accused of adoption, fraud, and mail interception." Their car dealership started receiving negative reviews and phone calls from outraged customers. Several major clients canceled contracts. Robert was forced to resign from the Chamber of Commerce board, and Patricia was quietly asked to step down from all her volunteer positions. But the most satisfying moment came when Jessica, my attorney, called with an update on our legal case. Scarlett, you are not going to believe this, she said, barely containing her excitement. Their lawyer just called requesting a settlement meeting. Apparently they want to resolve this quickly and quietly. What kind of settlement? They are offering to pay you $50,000, formally apologize to Elena, and agree to never contact you again unless you initiate it. Plus, they will cover all legal fees. I almost laughed out loud. A week ago, they were demanding I pay them $400,000. Now they wanted to pay me to make this go away. Counter offer, I said. $100,000, a public apology in the Sacramento Bee newspaper, and they fund Elena's cancer treatment for the next 2 years. Non-negotiable. That is a significant escalation. Are you sure? They escalated first when they decided to hide my biological mother's cancer diagnosis from me. They can pay for her treatment as part of their penance. The settlement meeting took place in Jessica's conference room the following Friday. Robert and Patricia looked like they had aged 10 years in the past week. Patricia's designer clothes could not hide the stress and exhaustion on her face. Robert's usual commanding presence had been replaced by the demeanor of a defeated man. Their attorney was a sharp-dressed woman in her 50s who clearly wanted this case to disappear as quickly as possible. My clients are prepared to agree to your terms, she said without preamble. $100,000 public apology and funding for Elena Rodriguez's medical treatment. In exchange, you agree to make no further public statements about this matter and pursue no additional legal action. There is one more condition, I said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. They will also facilitate a meeting between Elena and her extended family members who want to meet me. No interference, no manipulation, no attempts to control the narrative. Patricia finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. We never meant for things to go this far. You meant every bit of it, I replied coldly. You meant to hide my biological mother from me. You meant to make me feel guilty for existing. You meant to profit from my presence while making me believe I owed you everything. The only thing you did not mean was to get caught. Robert signed the settlement papers with shaking hands. As they prepared to leave, Patricia turned back to me one final time. I hope someday you can forgive us. I forgive you, I said quietly, but forgiveness does not mean forgetting, and it definitely does not mean trusting you again. After they left, Jessica shook her head in amazement. In 20 years of family law, I have never seen such a complete reversal of power dynamics. You did not just win this case, you obliterated them. They taught me that family is a business transaction, I replied. I just proved I was better at business than they were. The public apology appeared in the Sacramento Bee 3 days later, buried on page 6 of the local section. It was a carefully worded statement acknowledging errors in judgment regarding adoption, communication protocols, and expressing regret for any pain caused to all parties involved. It was the kind of non-apology that admitted fault without actually taking responsibility, but it was enough to satisfy the legal requirements. What mattered more was the private letter they sent to Elena, which Jessica had reviewed before it was delivered. In it, they acknowledged violating the contact agreement, apologized for intercepting her letters, and included a cashier's check for the first year of her medical treatment expenses. Elena called me the day she received it, crying with relief and gratitude. I never wanted to cause problems in your family, she said through her tears. But knowing that my medical bills will not be a burden anymore, I can focus on getting better instead of worrying about money. You did not cause any problems, I assured her. You just exposed problems that were already there. The ripple effects of their downfall continued for weeks. Robert and Patricia had to sell one of their car dealerships to cover the settlement costs and the loss of business from their damaged reputation. They put their house on the market and moved into a smaller place across town. Their social circle, built on decades of networking and community involvement, essentially evaporated overnight. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Patricia had started seeing a therapist and had joined a support group for people dealing with family estrangement. Robert threw himself into work trying to rebuild their business reputation one customer at a time. But the most interesting development came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after the settlement, I received a phone call from someone named David Chen, who identified himself as a private investigator. Miss Scarlett, I have been hired by a law firm representing several other adoptive families who worked with the same agency that handled your adoption, he explained. We have reason to believe that the problems you experienced with your adoptive parents may be part of a larger pattern. It turned out that the adoption agency that had facilitated my placement had been under investigation for years. Multiple families had reported similar issues, biological parents being told their children did not want contact when the children had never been informed of the attempts, adoptive parents violating contact agreements, and financial parents, irregularities in how state support payments were handled. Your case has given several other people the courage to come forward, David explained. Your presentation has been shared in adoption reform circles, and it is helping expose systematic problems in how some agencies operate. I found myself becoming an accidental advocate for adoption reform and adoptee rights. Local support groups invited me to speak about my experience. A family law professor at UC Davis asked me to guest lecture in her class about the intersection of adoption law and technology. Most importantly, I connected with other adult adoptees who had experienced similar betrayals and violations of trust. We formed an informal support network sharing resources and strategies for dealing with complicated family dynamics. Elena's health improved dramatically once the stress of medical bills was removed from her life. Her cancer responded well to treatment, and by the end of the summer she was declared to be in remission. We celebrated with a small party at her apartment, attended by several of her family members who had become my extended family. "You gave me my life back," Elena said as we sat on her balcony, watching the sunset over Los Angeles. "Not just by finding me, but by fighting for what was right." "You gave me my identity back," I replied. "I spent 23 years not knowing who I really was." Meanwhile, my relationship with Robert and Patricia remained severed. They made no attempts to contact me after the settlement, and I had no desire to reach out to them. Occasionally, I would hear updates through the Sacramento Community Network. They were slowly rebuilding their business, keeping a much lower profile in social and charitable activities. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles, but I also felt no sympathy. They had created their own consequences through their choices and actions. My career flourished during this period. The confidence I had gained from successfully handling such a complex and emotionally charged situation translated into professional success. I was promoted to senior software engineer and began leading major projects for my company. Madison often joked that watching me take down my adoptive parents had been like seeing someone discover their superpower. "You went from being manipulated and guilted into feeling bad about yourself to completely dismantling two people who had decades more life experience," she observed. It was honestly terrifying and impressive at the same time. But the most profound change was internal. For the first time in my adult life, I was not carrying guilt about my existence, my choices, or my relationships. I had learned to distinguish between love and manipulation, between family loyalty and family exploitation. I had discovered that chosen family, people who support you because they genuinely care about your well-being, was infinitely more valuable than biological family who treated you like an investment that should provide returns. As autumn approached, I realized that the scared, guilty young woman who had packed a suitcase and fled her childhood home 6 months earlier no longer existed. In her place was someone who understood her worth, knew her history, and was unafraid to demand the respect she deserved. The transformation was complete, but the best part of the story was still to come. 1 year later, I stood in Elena's hospital room, holding her hand as she received the news that her cancer had not returned. The oncologist smiled as he delivered the results of her latest scans, completely clear with no signs of recurrence. "I think we can officially say you are beating this thing," he said warmly. Elena squeezed my hand and started crying happy tears. In the chair beside her bed sat her sister Maria, who had driven up from San Diego to be present for the appointment. At the foot of the bed stood her nephew, Carlos, who had become like a brother to me over the past year. This was my real family. People who had welcomed me with open arms simply because I was part of Elena's life. No conditions, no expectations of repayment, no guilt trips about gratitude. Just genuine love and acceptance. The contrast with my childhood could not have been more stark. Over the past 12 months, I had built the life I had always wanted, but never dared to hope for. My career continued to advance rapidly. I was now leading a team of developers working on innovative healthcare technology. The irony was not lost on me that my work was helping improve medical systems while Elena battled her illness. Elena and I had developed the mother-daughter relationship we both had been denied for so many years. We talked several times a week, visited each other regularly, and had created new traditions and memories together. She taught me to cook traditional Mexican dishes that had been passed down through generations of women in our family. I helped her navigate insurance, paperwork, and technology challenges related to her treatment. We had also connected with extended family members who had wondered about me for decades. My grandmother, Elena's mother, was 83 years old and still sharp as a tack. When we first met, she held my face in her weathered hands and whispered in Spanish that I looked exactly like Elena had at my age. "Mia, we have been praying for you for 24 years, she said through tears. "Welcome home." I learned about my heritage, my family history, and the cultural traditions I had missed growing up. I discovered that I came from a long line of strong women who had overcome significant obstacles to provide better lives for their children. My biological father's family also welcomed me warmly once Elena helped facilitate contact. He had passed away several years earlier, but his siblings and parents were eager to know their niece and granddaughter. The legal aftermath of my case continued to create positive changes. The adoption agency that had facilitated my placement was investigated and ultimately shut down for systematic violations of contact agreements and financial fraud. Several other adoptive families were held accountable for similar deceptions, and new regulations were implemented to protect biological parent rights and adoptee access to information. I had become an unexpected voice in adoption reform, speaking at conferences and working with legislators to strengthen adoptee rights laws. The presentation that had started as a weapon against my adoptive parents had evolved into an educational tool used by family law attorneys and social workers across the state. As for Robert and Patricia, I had heard through the Sacramento community that they had eventually stabilized their business and personal lives. They kept a much lower profile than before, focusing on their work rather than social climbing. Occasionally, someone would mention seeing them at a restaurant or community event, but they no longer commanded the respect and influence they had once enjoyed. I felt neither satisfaction nor regret about their reduced circumstances. They had created their own consequences, and they were living with the results of their choices, just as I was living with the results of mine. The difference was that my choices had led to authentic relationships, personal growth, and genuine happiness. Their choices had led to isolation, damaged reputations, and the loss of the daughter they claimed to love. Madison often asked if I ever considered reaching out to them, perhaps offering some path toward reconciliation. "They are still your parents in some way," she would say. "Maybe there could be a relationship built on honesty now." But I had learned an important lesson about toxic relationships and boundaries. Some bridges are burned for good reason, and not every relationship is worth saving. The people who manipulate you into feeling guilty for existing do not suddenly become safe to have in your life just because you have gained the upper hand. My life was full of people who loved and supported me without conditions or expectations. Why would I invite back the people who had spent years making me feel like a burden? Elena had taught me that real love does not keep scorecards or demand repayment. Real love celebrates your successes, supports you through challenges, and never makes you feel guilty for being yourself. As I sat in that hospital room celebrating Elena's clean scan results, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. A year and a half ago, I had been a confused young woman who believed she owed everything to people who resented her existence. Today, I was a confident professional surrounded by chosen family who cherished my presence in their lives. The scared girl who had packed a suitcase and fled her childhood home no longer existed. In her place was someone who understood her worth, knew her history, and had built a life based on authentic relationships rather than manipulation and guilt. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from people who treat your love like a debt to be collected rather than a gift to be treasured. So, here is my question for all of you watching today. Have you ever had to cut ties with toxic family members to protect your own well-being? How do you handle people who try to make you feel guilty for setting boundaries? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I know many of you have your own stories of family drama and choosing your own path. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help other people find it who might need to hear this message. Do not forget to subscribe for more real-life drama stories and share this video with anyone who might be struggling with toxic family dynamics. Thank you so much for watching and for all your support as I have shared this very personal journey with you. Remember that your worth is not determined by other people's opinions, and sometimes the family you choose is more loving than the family you were born into. Until next time, stay strong and keep fighting for the life you deserve.